Hi there everyone, today I'm reviewing Be Useful by Arnold Schwarzenegger. So if there are too many self-help books, then it might at least be worth reading one by Arnie, which is how I will respectfully and affectionately call Arnold Schwarzenegger for the rest of this review. Arguably the greatest bodybuilder to have ever lived, movie star and governor, Arnie has been successful in many areas in his life. In this book, he takes the no-nonsense self-help book approach, framing his success as being down to 7 tools or approaches, of which each takes up a chapter of this book. So is it advice actually worth reading? Well, let's find out. So I have huge admiration for Arnie, feeling that besides being hugely successful, he has also been quite open towards criticism. He provided inspiration for countless bodybuilders, and if you're younger than me, just know that Predator is an excellent film, a kind of classic, although obviously it comes across a little dated now, but I think it's still worth a watch. In this book, we do tend to have a fairly standard approach in terms of a self-help book. Arnie argues that there is little substitute for hard work. And really, that you should aim big despite detractors. You should be useful to others, as the name of the book says. And kind of give and provide to others without necessarily expecting anything in return. And that these are effective approaches, and he relays how these approaches helped him kind of get where he is today in his own life. And personally, I think it is interesting enough because of the breadth of his kind of life and experiences. It does remain fairly varied in terms of the anecdotes. It's like in terms of, his sort of bodybuilding career, his life as a politician. It kind of avoids it being too stale often. But then there is also the kind of problem of it coming across a bit self-aggrandizing because of his success. He's talking a lot about what he did right, how he did things correctly. But it is kind of hard to play devil's advocate with this because obviously when somebody is as successful as him and they're kind of waxing lyrical about their successes, it's quite naturally, it just comes across a bit pompous, a bit kind of look how good I am. But Arnie is someone who's clearly, has had the kind of method, has kind of done things effectively, has worked really hard, such as with his bodybuilding. He talks about how many hours he exercised. And one really interesting area was how he talked about calves, the back of your leg being a kind of problematic area for bodybuilders. And he sort of said, well, because that was a problem, he really just focused on it every day. It was the first thing he started training in the gym, because he knew it was kind of a potential weak point. So although he's talking a lot about his success and how, kind of how good he is, I suppose, in a way, it's kind of hard to not come across self-aggrandizing, obviously. And I think you could level that criticism at a lot of self-help books by famous people. But really, the book itself is divided into 7 tools, as the title says, 7 tools for life. The first 2 of which are have a clear vision and never think small. So the book then talks about how Arnie applied those himself. And I do get the feeling that the book has kind of been structured around this sense. So, okay, let's think up 7 tools and then how did they fit into my life? It's probably what Arnie was kind of thinking in a way. But that approach doesn't necessarily render them null and void. It just means that perhaps it kind of comes across a little bit formulaic, because how many self-help books have you seen where there's just like 5 steps or 6 things to always implement? So as with every self-help book review, I do get the sense that if you kind of read, say, 5 or 6 self-help books, you've pretty much read 95% of them, arguably. You're obviously going to come across the odd idea that's new. I would actually argue that a lot of the ideas are kind of ancient in origin. Obviously things like Stoicism, other philosophy, Eastern philosophy has obviously been very influential in self-help. So, Be Useful kind of suffers from that, where, a lot of it really isn't new. But the advice in here is good. It really argues for a reliance, determination despite obstacles, and thinking about where you really want to be. It perhaps doesn't really do a good job of going much further than that, though. What about if you struggle to create that vision or sort of even know where to start? What about setbacks that are inevitable? I think that a lot of self-help books make this mistake where they're kind of unwilling to go any deeper than very surface level. And although often, you can probably work out the answers for yourself, or you probably have your own take on it, it doesn't really even try to tackle anything like that where it goes a bit deeper. So I think that's usually a missed opportunity, and I think this suffers from that. I suspect the focus on this book is people who, admire Arnie already. That's probably why they're buying it. And they probably want some tidbits from his own life, and they're here in abundance. But personally, I would have liked it if there's a bit more depth, and because the book only clocks in at like 260 pages, I think there's definitely room to do that. So in terms of final score for Be Useful, this is pretty much self-help book standard fare. And although the 7 tools are generally, pretty good ones, I would say for the most part, although I think there's 1 or 2 I was a bit like, seems a bit general. The advice is often fairly surface level, kind of obvious to a lot of people probably, and not exactly groundbreaking or detailed. But if you want a bit of advice alongside with kind of learning, more about Arnie and his own anecdotes and life, then it's a decent enough read. It's the kind of book you can go through in a couple of hours without much effort. But then again, it is also one that you probably isn't really going to stay with you that much, despite the advice being generally useful. So I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10. It's decent enough, but just doesn't do anything special. I'll be reviewing plenty more books covering self-help, ancient history, sci-fi, especially Warhammer. So like and subscribe for that, and thanks for watching.